A sharp glass-like pain scraped across my lungs. That familiar sting always came right before death. Ian Parker, at 45 years old, died on a narrow cot in the cold corridor of a rundown hospital during a bitter winter. In my hand, I clutched a photograph of my son, Ryan Parker, when he was 10 years old. In the photo, he was smiling brightly. Outside the frame, tears streamed down my face. My ex-husband, James Parker, by then had become the highly decorated Colonel Parker. After our divorce, he married Lana White, a nurse from the military hospital, the kind of woman who loved to flaunt her devotion to the army and recite patriotic lines to impress others. They lived comfortably in a bright, clean apartment in the officer's compound. Meanwhile, my son Ryan, carefully raised under their influence, no longer acknowledged me, the rural mother who embarrassed him. My entire life had been one long pathetic joke. For James' career, I gave up my chance to attend night school. I stayed in the countryside, caring for his sharp-tongued, bitter mother and raising his two useless younger siblings. Every penny I saved, I sent to him in the army so he could socialize properly and stand tall before his superiors. I thought my sacrifices would earn his love. But when he was finally promoted to company commander and I was told that my son and I could join him, what I found instead was the sight of James Parker and Lana White kissing in a small grove behind the military base. I confronted him like a madwoman, but he only pushed me away coldly and said I didn't understand his spiritual world. He said that between me and Lana, one was a grain of rice and the other was the moonlight. His mother, Gloria Jang, jabbed her finger at my face and called me a useless hen that couldn't lay eggs but still sat on the nest. She said my rustic ways would only hold her son back from promotion. Their whole family kicked me out like I was nothing but a stone in their path. To make sure I left with nothing, they even accused me of stealing from the house, humiliating me in front of everyone in the compound. They easily took Ryan's custody, claiming they could give him a better education and a brighter future. From that moment, my life plunged straight into hell. And now it seemed that even the flames of hell had burned themselves out. Lynn, wake up. The fierce shaking jolted me out of the darkness. I opened my eyes and saw an anxious, familiar face. My one and only younger sister, Wendy Parker. She was wearing a light blue cotton shirt, faded from too many washes. The one I'd bought for her. What's wrong with you? You just argued with your husband. How could you jump into the river over that? If something happened to you, how would Mom and Dad live? Wendy sobbed. Her face was streaked with tears and snot. I stared at her blankly, then looked down at myself. My coarse, drenched clothes clung to my skin, and the smell of river water filled my nose. Around me stretched the familiar yellow dirt of my hometown. Not far away stood the entrance to the village where I'd lived for 20 years. I had come back to life. A wave of wild joy squeezed my chest. I wasn't dying in that hospital anymore. I was back to when I was 25 years old. I remembered this day clearly. James had just been promoted to deputy company commander and had sent home a letter full of ambition and excitement. But at the end he mentioned a new nurse at the military hospital, Lana White, and wrote about how talented she was, how she could talk with him about war and peace. In my previous life, when I read that letter, an uneasy feeling stirred inside me, a faint sense of betrayal that I didn't dare to confront. I buried that fear deep in my heart and tried even harder to please his family, thinking it would make him love me more. But only a few days later, my mother-in-law, Gloria Jang, exploded in fury because I couldn't come up with enough money for her younger son's wedding dowry. She shouted that I was a curse to the family, a miserable woman who only brought misfortune. She cursed that James Parker must have been cursed for 8 generations to have married me. In my past life, her words cut me so deeply I could barely breathe. Thinking of James's letter, the one laced with vague affection for Lana White, I lost control and jumped into the river at the village entrance. Though I was rescued, that act became the irrefutable proof of my weak character. And later, the leverage my in-laws used to control me. They always said, "See, without our James, she can't even live." But now, as I looked at everything before me, I no longer felt wronged. There was no sorrow, no pain, only a cold, piercing clarity. Couldn't live without him? No. This time, the ones who wouldn't be able to live would be them. "I'm fine, Wendy," I said, wiping the water from my face. My voice was unnervingly calm. "I just swallowed some river water, but my head's clearer now. Help me up. Let's go home." Wendy stared at me, startled by how steady I sounded, but she did as I said and helped me to my feet. When we got home, Gloria Jang was already standing in the middle of the yard, hands on her hips, yelling at my parents. "What kind of daughter did you raise? Hams is serving the country in the army, and she's here trying to kill herself at home. Is she trying to ruin his reputation and destroy his future? I'm telling you, our Parker family doesn't want this daughter-in-law. Take her back." My parents were simple, honest farmers. They stood there, heads bowed, unable to say a word under her tirade. In my past life I had knelt in tears, begging her not to send me away. But this time I simply walked forward and stood in front of her, my voice cold and steady. "All right." The courtyard went dead silent. Gloria's sharp mouth dropped open so wide you could have stuffed an egg inside. What did you just say?" I said, "All right." I enunciated every word clearly. "If you think I'm not good enough for James Parker, then let's get divorced." How dare you?" Gloria screeched like a cat with its tail stepped on. "You barren hen, who would want you once you leave our James? You dare talk about divorce?" Why wouldn't I dare? I looked straight into her eyes, my gaze cold and unwavering. Was it me who brought it up first? Didn't you just say yourself that your Parker family can't afford a daughter-in-law like me? Everyone in the village heard you. I took a slow breath and continued, my voice loud enough for the crowd that had gathered around. "I may be a rural woman, but I still know what dignity means. Since the Parker family looks down on me, why should I cling to you shamelessly? Good. This saves me the trouble of working myself to the bone serving your entire family only to be scolded in the end. From now on, the money I earn, the money I used to send to James Parker, I'll keep it for myself. Doesn't that sound better?" My words were watertight, leaving no room for her to twist. Gloria choked, her mouth opening and closing without sound. She had planned to humiliate me and put me in my place, but I'd pulled the rug right out from under her. "You've got some nerve," she finally shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You think getting a divorce is that easy? You've wasted our James' youth for years. You'll have to pay for that." I smiled, but the smile never reached my eyes. "Gloria, you better think carefully. Was it me who wasted his youth, or your two precious sons and that daughter of yours who've been draining this family dry? Do you even know how much James earns each month? How much he actually sends home? I've kept records, every penny accounted for. And the money I saved for him all these years, not a single cent missing. All of it was spent filling the bottomless pits that are your three useless children. Do you want me to take out the records right now and go over every penny in front of the entire village?" My words hit Gloria Jang right where it hurt. She'd been secretly taking James Parker's military stipends to spend on her younger son and daughter, a secret she thought I'd never dare mention. She always believed I was the meek, submissive daughter-in-law who wouldn't speak up no matter what she did. Gloria's face turned red, then pale, her trembling finger pointing straight at me. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "And 2 years ago, you stole the 50 silver dollars I'd saved for your medical treatment, then handed it all to your nephew from your mother's side. If James ever finds out about that, what do you think he'll say?" Her eyes widened in shock, staring at me as if she'd seen a ghost. That was something she had drunkenly confessed in my previous life, a secret I had swallowed in silence, thinking it was just another injustice I had to endure. I never imagined that in this life it would become my weapon. You're lying," she stammered, her voice shaking. "Am I?" I said evenly. "You know exactly whether I'm lying or not." Then, raising my voice back to normal, I continued calmly. "We can get divorced under 2 conditions. First, every penny of the money James sent home, aside from what he gave you as filial support, must be returned to me. The total we saved together as husband and wife is $327.50, not a cent less. Second, you'll write a letter stating that our marriage broke down, and that it was you who asked for the divorce. You'll sign it and press your fingerprint on it. Otherwise, I'll write to James and tell him everything about your family's dirty dealings, and send a copy to his political commissar in the unit. Let's see what they think about their model soldier's family." "You dare threaten me?" Gloria hissed. "I'm only stating the facts," I said coldly. "The choice is yours." In that era, the army paid close attention to a soldier's family conduct. If word got out about this kind of scandal, especially that James's family had embezzled his stipends. Not only would his promotion be gone, but he'd also face serious punishment. Gloria clearly understood that, too. She glared at me, her chest heaving, her lips trembling with fury. Finally, she spat out the words between clenched teeth. "Fine, you win." 3 days later, I held in my hands the reluctant letter Gloria had written and the $300 she'd scraped together to return to me. With those, I boarded a train heading to the army base. I wasn't going there to beg for reconciliation. I was going to file for divorce and to tear off James Parker's hypocritical mask right in front of Lana White. When I stepped once again into the familiar army compound and looked at the gray residential building, my heart was calm, cold, and still. In my previous life, I had arrived full of joy, thinking I was about to start a happy new life with my husband. Instead, I'd suffered humiliation beyond words. This time, I was here to collect my debts. I didn't go to James right away. Instead, I stopped first at the military supply shop and bought 2 pounds of dense pastries. Then, I walked straight to the home of Commissioner William Wong. His wife, Susan, was a warm-hearted woman. In my previous life, she had tried to help me many times, but I'd been too timid and too afraid of exposing family shame. I'd wasted her kindness. "Mrs. Wong, it's me, Lynn Parker," I said at the door, holding out the pastries. She froze for a moment, then her face lit up with genuine warmth as she pulled me inside. "Lynn, what brings you here? James was just talking about you a few days ago. Come in. Come in. Sit down." I shook my head, tears welling in my eyes as I forced out a few perfectly timed drops. "I can't stay long, Mrs. Wong. I'm here to ask Commissioner Wong to handle my divorce." "What?" she gasped, completely stunned. "Divorce? What on earth happened? Did that boy James do something to you? Tell me everything," Susan Wong said firmly. "I'll handle it for you." Choking back my emotions, I handed her the letter Gloria Jang had written. Then, half-truthfully, I began to describe how my mother-in-law despised me, how she constantly belittled and forced me into divorce. I left out the part about my own retaliation and instead painted myself as a helpless, mistreated wife with nowhere else to go. "That woman's out of her mind." Susan slammed her hand against her thigh in anger. "And James too? How could he let his mother treat you like this?" "No, I have to tell William to speak to him properly." "Please don't," I said softly, reaching out to stop her, forcing a faint smile. "You can't force a melon to be sweet once it's twisted off the vine." His mother's right. I'm just a rural woman unworthy of the bright future of Deputy Commander Parker. I came here just to end things peacefully, get the paperwork done, and let each of us go our separate ways. My calmness and willingness to let go stirred both compassion and indignation in Susan. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Do ordinary friends hold hands and talk about life and ideals under the trees? Spare me your lies, James Parker. I didn't come here to hear your excuses. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared long ago and slapped them onto the table. Sign it. I won't fight you for the house or the savings. As for your medals and honors, I can't take those anyway. I only want my son. The moment I mentioned Ryan Parker, James' expression darkened. In my previous life, he had used our son to control me, tormenting me until I was barely alive. But this time, I would never again hand him my weakness. Impossible, he said flatly. Ryan is the eldest grandson of the Parker family. He stays with me. With you? So you can teach him how to betray and abandon others, how to become a man without honor. I refused to back down. James Parker, I'll give you 2 choices. First, you sign these papers peacefully. We divorce quietly. Ryan stays with me. I'll tell everyone that we simply fell out of love, that it has nothing to do with you. Your reputation as Deputy Commander Parker will remain untouched. I paused deliberately, watching his face tighten with unease before continuing, each word cold and deliberate. Or second, I take the evidence of you and your little mistress to the Army's disciplinary committee. You know better than I do what the charge for adultery is in the military. And when that happens, forget your future. You might not even get to keep that uniform you're wearing. You wouldn't dare. His voice shook with rage as he lunged forward, gripping my wrist tightly. I didn't struggle. I only looked at him, calm and unflinching. My eyes filled with disappointment and scorn. You want to see if I dare? His fingers dug into my skin painfully, but I didn't even flinch. We stared at each other, locked in a silent battle of will. In the end, he was the one who broke. His hand fell away, and the look in his eyes was a mix of humiliation and defeat. He knew I had him by the throat. His career was his life, and I had just crushed it in my palm. "Ryan stays with you," he spat, the words squeezed through gritted teeth. "But you have to leave now, and you are never to come back." "Fine by me." I picked up the pen and signed my name on the divorce papers. Just standing in that place made my skin crawl. The divorce went through surprisingly smoothly with Commissioner William Wong and Susan Wong overseeing everything. James didn't dare pull any tricks. He even handed me $500 as compensation. Desperate to make me and my son disappear as quickly as possible. Holding 4-year-old Ryan in my arms, I left that army compound, the place that had carried 10 years of my nightmares without looking back once. I knew people were talking about me behind my back. Some pitied me, some mocked me, but most were waiting to see how miserable I'd become. A woman without a husband dragging a child around like dead weight. James thought so too. He was certain that within half a year, reality would crush me until I came crawling back to him in tears. But I disappointed them all. I didn't return to my hometown to endure my in-laws' sneers. Nor did I go begging my parents for help. Instead, I took Ryan and all the money I had and went straight to the provincial capital. It was the 1980s. The winds of reform were rising and opportunity was everywhere. Thanks to the memories of my previous life, I knew that in the decades to come, the restaurant business would become a golden trade that would never fade. Moving quickly, I rented a small storefront near an old residential district in the city. The area was surrounded by several large state-owned factories full of workers and heavy foot traffic. The perfect spot for a food stall. I cleaned and arranged the place until it sparkled, then hung up a simple wooden sign that read Lynn's Dumpling House. I sold what I had learned in my previous life while working down south. Handmade dumplings filled with my improved recipes to suit the local taste. A fresh 3 delight filling and a savory cabbage and pork filling. Thin skins, generous fillings, and rich, flavorful broth. On opening day, to attract customers, I launched a special offer. Every plate of dumplings came with a free bowl of bone broth. That broth had been simmered all night with pork bones and chicken frames until it turned rich and milky white, its aroma drifting halfway down the street. Before long, waves of tired factory workers followed the scent and poured in. "Ma'am, your dumplings are incredible," one said between bites. "This soup's amazing, even thicker than the one I make at home," said another. Compliments filled the tiny shop non-stop. From the very first day, Lynn's Dumpling House was packed with customers. Ryan Parker was such a well-behaved child. He never cried or fussed, just sat quietly on a little stool, playing with his blocks. Sometimes when the shop got crowded, he'd mimic my tone in his soft, milky voice, greeting customers with, "Welcome." Every time I heard him say that, I felt every bit of exhaustion melt away. It was all worth it. But booming business always attracts envy. Not long after, a few local thugs came around saying they were there to collect protection fees. In my past life, I would have panicked and had no idea what to do. But this time I stayed calm. "Boys," I said politely, "running a small business isn't easy. Why don't you sit down and have some dumplings on the house? Let me treat you today. Tomorrow, I'll give you my answer about the money." They looked at each other, then followed me in. I served each of them a big plate of steaming hot dumplings. They tasted something unusual that day, though they couldn't quite place it. The next morning, I had $100 ready, prepared to pay them off and be done with it. But instead of the thugs, it was the police who showed up at my shop. It turned out that the dumplings I'd served those men contained a special ingredient, a wild herb I'd gathered from the mountains near my hometown. The herb wasn't poisonous, but when mixed into food, it caused severe itching and red rashes all over the body within 12 hours. No hospital could diagnose it. Those men had spent the entire night scratching and panicking, convinced they'd caught some kind of strange disease. By morning, terrified out of their minds, they went to the police station and turned themselves in, confessing every crime of extortion and blackmail, just begging the officers to send them to a big hospital for treatment. After that incident, my name spread quickly through the neighborhood. Everyone knew Lynn Parker, the owner of Lynn's Dumpling House, was not someone to mess with. No one dared to cause me trouble again. A year later, my little shop had grown into Lin's food court. What started with dumplings and noodles soon expanded into braised dishes and fried chicken foods that would later sweep across the whole country. My business grew bigger and stronger, and I became the city's first self-made woman to earn over $10,000. I even bought a large house with a garden in one of the best districts of the provincial capital. I brought my parents and my sister Wendy Parker to live with me. Wendy became the manager of one of my restaurants, showing remarkable talent for organization and leadership, while my parents enjoyed their peaceful retirement, tending vegetables and flowers in the yard. My life was now worlds apart from the misery of my past one. From time to time, I'd still hear bits of news about James Parker, always from soldiers returning home on leave. They said that after divorcing me, he had quickly married Lana White. Apparently, Lana was pampered and delicate, completely incapable of housework, let alone taking care of anyone. When James came home from training, he often couldn't even get a warm meal. They said that Gloria Zhang had tried to boss Lana around, but Lana turned the tables on her, writing a letter to her parents, both senior officials at the military hospital. One phone call from them to James' commanding officer was enough to silence Gloria completely. From then on, she didn't dare utter a word and even had to serve Lana instead. Rumor had it that James' home was filled with constant quarrels. Small fights every 3 days, big ones every 5. The whole residential block could hear them yelling. Gradually, he began to miss the peace and steadiness of the days when I was still there. More than once, he even tried to ask around to find out where I had gone. When James Parker found out that I was now worth over $10,000, a well-known businesswoman in the provincial capital, they said he didn't smile for an entire week. On the training ground, he took out all his frustration on his soldiers, drilling them to exhaustion. He regretted it. His scheming mother, Gloria Zhang, regretted it even more, to the point of nearly choking on her own bitterness. One day, he actually showed up in the provincial capital. Standing outside the gate of my bright, spacious home, he cried and wailed like a madman, claiming that he had been blinded by greed and stupidity back then. He begged me to remarry him for Ryan's sake, crying, "Ryan can't grow up without a father." I told Wendy to open the gate. In front of all the neighbors who had gathered to watch, I called out to Ryan, who was in the yard, dressed neatly in a little suit, reading a book under the sun. "See," I said, pointing at Ryan as I turned to Gloria. "My son already has a mother who loves him. That's all he needs. As for a father, do you really think James Parker deserves that title?" I stared at Gloria's face, which had turned the color of pig liver, and added coldly, "Deputy Commander Parker was always in pursuit of spiritual resonance and moonlight purity, wasn't he? I, a lowly, money-stained businesswoman, could never live up to that. So, please leave before you dirty my doorstep." Then I slammed the door shut with a loud bang, cutting off their crying and howling completely. At that moment, I felt as if the suffocating weight that had pressed on my chest for an entire lifetime had finally lifted. I thought that would be the end of everything between me and James Parker. But fate, as it turned out, had far more dramatic plans. It happened on an early summer afternoon. Ryan was playing in the yard with the neighbor's kids when he tripped and fell, hitting his forehead hard. Blood gushed out and my heart nearly stopped. I scooped him up and rushed him to the nearest military hospital. In the emergency room corridor, I waited anxiously. A man in uniform with 2 bars and 4 stars on his shoulder strode past me quickly. His orderly brushed against me accidentally. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," the young soldier said at once. "It's fine," I replied, waving a hand, my full attention still on the emergency room door. The man stopped, turned and looked at me. His gaze was deep, steady, and carried the quiet authority of someone long accustomed to command. He seemed as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he simply nodded slightly before walking away. At the time, I didn't think much of it. A few days later, when Ryan had fully recovered, I took him to the park to play and ran into that man again. This time, he wasn't in uniform. He wore simple, casual clothes and was helping a little girl who looked about Ryan's age fly a kite. Ryan ran over to help when the girl's kite string got tangled. The 2 children quickly became friends, laughing together under the blue sky. And just like that, we met. His name was Leon Zhang, the highest-ranking commander in that military district. He was 10 years older than me. His wife had passed away several years earlier, leaving him with his only daughter, Chloe Zong. We talked for a long time about the children, about life, about my small business. Unlike James, Leon never once looked down on me for being a self-employed woman. On the contrary, he admired my independence and strength. "Miss Parker, you're remarkable," he said sincerely, his steady gaze full of genuine respect. "A woman raising a child on her own and building a thriving business. That's no small feat. Most people couldn't do what you've done." It was the first time in both my lives that a man had ever said something like that to me. Not "you should be" or "you're not worthy," but "you're remarkable." My heart skipped a beat before I could stop it. From that day on, as time went on, Leon Zhang and I began seeing each other more often. He would bring his daughter out under the pretense of taking her to play, then stop by my restaurant to sit for a while. Sometimes he even took off his uniform and helped me in the kitchen, chopping vegetables or kneading dough. He was calm, dependable, and gave me a sense of safety I had never known before. He treated Ryan as if he were his own son, patiently teaching him chess and telling him stories about battles and bravery. Meanwhile, Ryan and Chloe became the best of friends. People around us began to notice. My sister Wendy teased me more than once, saying, "Looks like you're going to be a general's wife soon." I laughed it off, but deep down, a quiet warmth bloomed in my heart. A sweetness so fragile that even I was afraid to acknowledge it. I had thought I would never again believe in love or in marriage. But Leon came into my life like a ray of sunlight, melting the ice that had long encased my heart. The day he proposed, there were no flowers, no dramatic vows. He simply looked into my eyes and then said earnestly, "Lynn, I can't promise you a life of luxury, but I can promise that I will always respect you, always support you, and always be the shoulder you can lean on. Please marry me." Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked into his steady, sincere gaze. I nodded hard, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. Our wedding was modest. Only close family and a few dear friends were invited. Afterward, I didn't give up my business, and Leon never once objected. In fact, he used his connections to help me solve my supply issues, allowing Lynn's food court to expand across the entire province. I became a true business powerhouse, and my husband was not only the most respected man in the region but also the one who loved me most. I thought that was where our story would end. A perfect, peaceful ending. Until that day, Leon received an official transfer order, assigning him to a new military district to take on a higher post. Naturally, the children and I were to move with him, and as fate would have it, the new district was the very one where James Parker was stationed. The wheels of destiny turned with a strange, almost mocking creak. The new military compound was grander than any I had ever seen, as the newly appointed top commander, Leon, was given a private 2-story residence. Standing on the second-floor balcony, I looked out over the neat rows of barracks and the soldiers training below, their sweat glistening in the sunlight. It felt like a dream, as if lifetimes had passed. Who would have imagined that the same rural woman once thrown out of this world in disgrace would now stand here again as the commander's wife? And as fate would have it, from Leon's aide, Officer Lee, I learned that James Parker was now also stationed here. After half a lifetime of ambition, he had finally climbed to the rank of battalion commander, the very position he had dreamed of when he left me behind. I merely smiled faintly and asked no more. The people and things of the past were nothing but dust to me now. What I had today far surpassed anything he could ever imagine. I was busy setting up our new home, busy studying the city's market to prepare for expanding my business here. James knew nothing of my arrival. He was still basking in the joy of his promotion, a proud milestone in his military career. He could finally stand tall and show off to those who had once looked down on him. Soon he would bring his pampered city-bred wife, Lana White, to live on base with him. It was the ultimate symbol of status and success. That day he sat in his freshly renovated office, turning a brand new pen in his hand, feeling utterly satisfied. In his mind, he could already picture the envious faces of his fellow officers once Lana arrived, the beautiful, refined wife of the great Commander Parker. He called in his new adjutant, a young man who had just graduated from the military academy. "Wang, bring me Lana White's military family application form. I'll sign it and you take it straight to the political office," James Parker ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Yes, Commander," the young adjutant replied immediately. A few minutes later, Wang returned with the form in hand, but his expression was strange. His lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. James frowned, irritation flashing in his eyes. What is it? Why are you standing there stalling? Wang's palms were damp with sweat as he clutched the thin sheet of paper. His voice trembled when he finally spoke. See, Commander Parker, there's something I think you should know. James' tone dropped an octave. What is it? Wang took a deep breath as though mustering his courage and lowered his voice. Sir, have you not been in touch with anyone back home lately? James's brow furrowed. What do you mean? It's about Lynn, sir, Wang said carefully, choosing his words as if walking on glass. At the mention of that name, a flicker of complex emotion crossed James' face. A mix of disdain, discomfort, and something darker. A trace of regret he refused to admit even to himself. But just as quickly, he forced it away, straightening his back and scoffing coldly. What about her? She's just a divorced countrywoman. Why bring her up? I told you to get Lana's paperwork approved, not gossip about the past. In his mind, Lynn was nothing more than a woman who had once embarrassed him, even if she had opened a little restaurant in the provincial capital. What of it? What waves could a small-town divorce possibly make? Perhaps he thought smugly. She was off somewhere struggling to survive, or losing her mind in bitterness. But the look on Wang's face only grew more awkward, almost pained. He looked as if he might cry. Commander, sir, you don't know. James's brows knitted tighter. Know what, Lynn? She got remarried 2 months ago. The pen in James's hand froze midair. The proud, smug smile that had been forming at his lips vanished instantly. Remarried? That woman, the one he thought couldn't live without him, the one he was sure would crawl back begging, had remarried. A surge of heat rose violently from his chest, anger and humiliation exploding inside him. Still, he forced himself to sneer, pretending it didn't matter. Married to who? Some old bachelor from her village? A delivery man from the city? Let her do as she pleases. But Wang didn't move. His eyes were full of sympathy and a flicker of fear. He swallowed hard before forcing out the words that would shatter everything. No, Commander, you really don't know. Mrs. Lin, she remarried Commander Lian Jiang, our new district chief. She's now Mrs. Jiang. Just yesterday, she was here accompanying him during his inspection of our compound. Wang's words hit James like a bolt of lightning splitting the sky. The gleaming pen in his hand, the symbol of his rank and pride, suddenly felt impossibly heavy, slipping from his fingers and clattering onto the polished desk with a sharp echoing crack. James shot up from his chair so abruptly that his knee slammed hard against the edge of the desk. He didn't even feel the pain. His eyes were bloodshot, fixed on Wang in disbelief. His face drained of color, then flushed red, twisting with shock, fury, and humiliation. His voice came out, trembling uncontrollably. What did you say? How dare she? How could she? The woman he had once scorned, abandoned, and declared would never rise again had not only risen, she had soared. And now she stood in a place so high he could never hope to reach it. The wife of his commander's commander, the position he had fought for all his life, the title of battalion commander that once filled him with pride, now seemed smaller than a speck of dust. His once proud, delicate wife Lana White now looked like nothing but a pitiful joke beside the title of commander's wife. A wave of remorse and humiliation crashed over James Parker like a flood, drowning him instantly. The room spun. The world itself seemed to collapse before his eyes. Outside his office window, the sun shone brightly, and the training field echoed with shouts of discipline and pride. Yet in James' world, there was only the sharp clack of the pen hitting the desk and the echo of his own strangled, furious cry. Absurd, bitter, and hollow. That was the sound of the slap I had given him, one that came 10 years too late but landed harder than any before.